what if once you finally get there to that peak, you find out it comes with this profound and totally unexpected sense of isolation.
Not just loneliness, though. Something different.
Right, not just loneliness. It's a specific strategic isolation, something that actually impacts how effective you can be.
That's a really striking place to start, isn't it? Because we're sort of conditioned to think of the top as, I don't know, ultimate connection. You're surrounded by influence, networks, power players.
Yeah, that's the image.
But the source material we're diving into today, it paints a very different picture. And frankly, a much more complex one for a very specific group of leaders.
Absolutely, and that's the core paradox we're going to explore in this deep dive. It's based on an article called The 0.5% Alliance, When Leadership Excellence Requires Strategic Partnership.
Okay.
And the author is Helena DeMonk. She's described here as a passionate advocate for women's empowerment, a transformation guide, and a women's leadership expert. Lots of experience in authentic leadership coaching.
Right, and her work seems to really focus on this specific group.
It does. The article drills down into this unique phenomenon that specifically affects, well, the very highest level of women leaders.
And understanding Helena DeMonk's background, I think, is pretty crucial here for context. The source notes her work is really deeply rooted in helping these high-achieving women identify and break free from limitations, both internal and, external. She focuses on helping them redefine success on their own terms, amplifying their influence, and, as she puts it, shattering inner glass ceilings through holistic transformation.
Shattering inner glass ceilings, I love.
Yeah. And her book, It's Your Turn, Break Free from Societal Boxes and Manifest Your True Greatness, sounds like it reflects this exactly. Same with her platforms, like the Boundary Breakers Collective and Power Talks for Remarkable Females.
Okay. So this article, it's not coming out of the blue. It stems directly from, decades of her observing and coaching women navigating this really complex senior leadership landscape.
Exactly. It's written from a place of deep expertise on the, let's say, unique challenges women face as they climb higher.
Right. So our mission then in this deep dive is to take this source material, pull out its most important insights. We really want to understand this phenomenon she calls the isolation ceiling at the very, very top.
Yeah, get under the surface of it.
We'll dig into not just what it is, but, why it happens, what the tangible consequences are. And then we need to examine the specific and honestly pretty intriguing solution the author proposes, something called the 0.5% Alliance.
Okay. And what makes that different?
Well, that's the question, right? What makes this proposed solution fundamentally different from, say, traditional networking or leadership programs? And why does the article suggest it's not just helpful, but may be absolutely essential for sustained high-level leadership excellence for women at this particular altitude?
It sounds like it's about peeling back those layers of visible success, the shiny stuff, to expose the less visible challenges, the things that can undermine even the most accomplished leaders.
Exactly. And that brings us squarely to the core argument the article makes, which it frames as the paradox of the pinnacle.
The paradox of the pinnacle. Okay.
This is the idea that you achieve this immense professional success, the corner office, the title, the power, all the stuff you work so hard for, only to find that something absolutely crucial is fundamentally missing once you're there.
And the article kicks off with an anecdote, right? Something that really brings this paradox into sharp focus.
Yeah, it does. It describes a senior executive, someone who is undeniably, top of her game.
Right.
She's in her office, just came out of what the source calls a particularly brutal board meeting.
Ooh, been there. Well, metaphorically.
Right. She successfully navigated it, defended a controversial acquisition strategy, huge professional win, right? Demonstrated skill under serious pressure.
Okay, so a moment of triumph.
You'd think.
Yeah.
But the immediate feeling she talks about wasn't just triumph or relief. She looked around and realized, and this is the quote, "There was no one I could call who truly understood the weight of what I just navigated."
Wow, that hits hard at the absolute peak after a major win.
Yeah, and the feeling is isolation. Not just any isolation, but specifically peer-level isolation. It wasn't that she didn't have friends or colleagues.
No, it was the lack of someone who could truly grasp the specific nuance, the political tightrope she just walked, the sheer pressure of that exact situation from their own similar high-stakes executive experience.
Exactly. And the source really emphasizes this isn't just a fleeting feeling for a few people. It's an unspoken reality for many women who reach this level.
And the article tries to quantify this, right? It brings in some data points citing McKinsey research.
It does. What did it say?
Well, they found that while women have made progress holding about 26% of C-suite positions now, which is significant progress.
Okay, 1 in 4, roughly.
Right. But these women report significantly higher rates of workplace isolation compared to their male counterparts.
Significantly higher. How much higher?
The source states it's 34% higher.
34%. Oh, that's not a minor difference you can just brush off.
No way. It points to a really systemic difference in experience. It's a substantial gap in how they experience connection and belonging at work compared to men at the very same level. And maybe even more telling is the next stat the article pulls from that research. A staggering 72% of these senior women report having no safe space.
72%. No safe space to do what?
To process strategic challenges, explore ideas that aren't fully formed yet, or even just admit uncertainty with peers who genuinely understand their unique position, their perspective, and the sheer complexity of the decisions they're wrestling with.
Hang on. Almost 3 out of 4 women in the highest executive ranks feel they lack a single trusted peer context to grapple with their most critical, most difficult challenges.
That's what the data suggests, yeah.
Wow. 72% having no safe space.
Yeah.
That statistic, really, it puts flesh on the bones of that unspoken reality. It's not just that there are fewer women, which we know is true,
Right.
but their experience of being at the top includes this pervasive lack of a specific kind of peer connection. A vital one, it sounds like.
Exactly. And that's really the heart of the paradox as the article lays it out. Look, the higher you climb in any field, the smaller the pool of true peers gets, naturally.
Sure, fewer people operate at that level.
But specifically for women at the C-suite level, the pool shrinks even further because you're looking for peers who have both the necessary intellectual rigor and strategic experience to engage on these complex, high-stakes issues.
Okay,
And the lived understanding of the unique complexity of leading as a woman in systems that, as the article notes, often weren't necessarily designed for us.
the how. The lived experience piece.
Right. So it's this combination, limited, truly comparable peers, plus that additional layer of navigating existing structures that creates this particular, really potent form of isolation at the summit. The source calls it summit isolation.
Summit isolation. It makes complete sense when you put it like that. Your challenges become so specialized, so high stakes, so politically tricky. The number of people who can authentically get it and offer relevant strategic insight just shrinks dramatically. And then you add that dimension of navigating power dynamics, organizational politics, potentially shaped by decades of being male-dominated. That second filter must make finding true peers incredibly difficult.
Precisely. It's like a compounding effect.
Yeah.
Which leads to this unique isolation right at the pinnacle. So, as the article argues, this isn't just about feeling a bit lonely sometimes. It's a very specific kind of isolation with profound, tangible professional consequences. Consequences that impact not just the individual, but potentially the entire organization.
Which leads us directly into the next big point the article tackles, the magnificent isolation problem and its impact. And the author gives this phenomenon that name, summit isolation.
Right, defining it as that state where you have this unprecedented professional success, but it coincides with this diminishing supply of authentic connection, specifically the absence of strategic thinking partners who are operating at the same caliber, same level of trust.
Magnificent isolation. It sounds grand and terrible at the same time.
It does capture that paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the source outlines 3 key consequences that flow directly from this isolation. The first one is what the author calls the echo chamber effect.
Okay, the echo chamber. We hear that term a lot, but what does it mean specifically at this C-suite level?
Well, without a diverse group of equally experienced peers who can genuinely challenge your thinking peers who've navigated similar storms, but maybe from a different angle, a different industry,
right.
Confirmation bias can just go completely unchecked, even at the highest levels,
Sure.
especially at the highest levels.
So your own brilliant ideas, your strategic assumptions, they can solidify and actually become blind spots simply because you lack peers operating at your level who can push back, offer a totally different perspective, or question an underlying assumption based on their own, hard-won wisdom.
Exactly that. At the C-suite level, decisions have massive ripple effects, often irreversible.
Huge stakes.
Huge. So if a leader's thinking isn't subject to rigorous challenge and validation from equals, who bring genuinely diverse experiences, not just diverse opinions, but diverse experiences of high-stakes leadership, strategic blind spots can develop.
And these aren't necessarily from incompetence.
No, not at all. That's the key. It's not about lack of intelligence or competence. It comes from the absence of that essential, multidimensional dialogue with peers who understand the scale of the decisions but see the chessboard differently. Think about the potential cost of a flawed strategy that wasn't stress-tested by truly independent, equally sharp minds.
That makes the echo chamber effect at the top sound, well, not just undesirable, but potentially really dangerous for the business itself.
It is. The stakes are just too high for critical thinking to go unchallenged. Which leads to the second consequence the article discusses, what it calls the performance paradox.
Performance paradox. Okay, what's the paradox here?
The source highlights that as women reach senior leadership, the performance expectations, the bar for excellence, it rises exponentially. You're expected to perform at an incredibly high level, consistently.
Which makes sense, right? More responsibility, higher expectations, standard stuff.
Right. But here's the paradox, and this is crucial. At the same time, psychological safety diminishes.
Yeah. Okay, so the very environment where you operate demands peak performance.
Exactly.
But the conditions that usually enable that peak performance, like feeling safe to explore ideas, admit you're not sure, seek counsel without fear of judgment, those conditions evaporate.
Precisely. They diminish significantly.
That feels like a really critical point. Why? Why does psychological safety drop off specifically for women at this level, according to the source?
The source doesn't go super deep into the why beyond pointing to that general idea of navigating systems not built for them and, the increased scrutiny that comes with being at the top. But the implication is clear. At the pinnacle, any perceived imperfection or uncertainty carries significant weight, maybe more weight for women.
There's that constant pressure to be on, right?
Sure.
To project absolute confidence, have all the answers all the time.
Exactly. And the article presents a truly striking statistic to underscore this. Get this. 83% of women in C-suite positions report carefully curating which challenges, vulnerabilities, or developing thoughts they actually discuss with internal colleagues.
83%.
Oh.
That's what, almost 9 out of 10 senior women feeling they have to filter what they say, hold back their real thinking process, hide areas of uncertainty when talking to people inside their own organization.
It creates what the article aptly calls a double bind.
A double bind. How so?
Well, precisely when these leaders are grappling with the most complex, multifaceted, maybe ambiguous decisions of their careers, decisions that need deep, nuanced thought, exploring multiple paths, maybe even admitting, I don't know yet. They feel least safe doing that openly within the very environment where those decisions have to be made. They feel they can't risk showing a thought that's still developing or admitting a potential struggle because of the perceived reputation risk, a risk that might be higher or feel higher because their women in roles often scrutinized more intensely.
So incredible pressure to make perfect decisions in a high-stakes game, but they lack the very conversational, exploratory environment needed to process those complex problems.
Yeah.
The kind of processing that allows for uncertainty and the evolution of thinking before you land on a final public decision, that sounds like a brutal trap.
It really is. And that pressure to perform perfectly without the necessary support structures, that leads to the third consequence the article identifies, innovation stagnation.
Okay, innovation stagnation. How does the isolation lead to that?
The source cites research pointing to something called collaborative collision as a primary source of breakthrough thinking.
Collaborative collision. I like that phrase. There's like productive friction. Okay. Like ideas bumping into each other, maybe challenging each other and creating something new, but based on trust.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. The source explains this happens when equally powerful but differently experienced leaders engage in rigorous, trust-based dialogue. It's not about gentle agreement all the time. It can be challenging, but it's grounded in mutual respect and a shared understanding of the level of play.
No.
The article argues that without these trusted communities of peers, people operating at the same strategic altitude, this essential collaborative collision just doesn't happen, or not enough.
And so innovative thinking, it narrows.
It narrows precisely when organizations need their top leaders to be most expansive, most creative, most open to new ideas.
So the lack of this specific kind of high-level peer interaction means the wellspring of breakthrough ideas potentially dries up right at the top.
Potentially, yes. Or it certainly doesn't flourish the way it could. And this isn't just a personal cost to the leader feeling isolated or struggling to fully explore ideas, it's a significant potential cost to the organization and maybe even the entire industry they influence.
Right.